StraighTAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is the truth about dominance. Now, this dovetails perfectly what we talked about in the previous episode about having power and influence over others. And the definition of dominance is power and influence over others, commanding, controlling, or prevailing over all others. That's what it means to dominate or to have dominance. Now, understand, you probably already understand, or you should understand, not everybody wants to dominate. Right? Not every person on the planet wants to be dominant. Not everybody wants to be in that position because, again, what comes with it, which we just talked about yesterday, is a whole lot of responsibility, a whole lot of blame. Even when you are not responsible, you get the blame for it. So not everybody wants this, but there are some out there who do. Now, in the sports world, for example, it is beneficial to dominate because when you dominate in sports, that means you are totally subjugating your opponent, which means you're probably going to win the game. You'll probably get the trophy or whatever else comes with the spoils of winning. But in the business world, this is not always the case. In business, you don't always want to completely subjugate your opponent. Sometimes you need that opponent. You need to beat them, but at the same time, you don't want to completely destroy them. Now, in sports, you want to completely destroy them because you don't need them again. But in business, you may need them again. So how can you be dominant? And again, what are the things you need to understand about dominance in an area in which is not just completely flatten everybody that you come across? Because completely subjugating your opponent, again, can work against you more than it works for you, especially in any type of collaborative environment, even with a coworker who you may be competing against or in conflict with, because you still need them to do their job, even if after you win. So let's talk about it. Point number one. Today's topic, once again, is the truth about dominance. Number one, dominance is about control, not necessarily aggression. This is what you have to understand about dominance. You can dominate something without being aggressive. You can just, as long as you have control over it, you dominate the situation. Real dominance is much more calm and composed and strategic than it is loud and chaotic. So some people just have the wrong idea of what it means to be dominant. They think it means being loud and chaotic and ultra aggressive at all times. That's not really what it is. It means being calm, composed, and strategic because you have control. And when you have control over something, just like we talked about a few days ago in the Guide to Masculine Movement, a masculine man who's in his full masculine is calm, composed, and strategic. He doesn't need to be loud, and he is definitely never chaotic. He may move, but he doesn't have to be chaotic. So when you dominate a situation, just think about it. It's because you can see the entire chessboard. You know what is happening. You have planned ahead of any situations that could or would occur. And because of all of this, you are able to remain calm even as the situation around you may appear or feel chaotic, or even as people around you, they appear or feel chaotic or out of sorts or jittery or anxious or fearful. When everybody else is fearful, the calmest person in the room becomes the leader by default. This applies in all aspects of life. So the person who is dominant usually has the leadership role by default, even if they don't have the title. Why? Because what we just described, this person is calm, composed, and strategic, even when things are looking crazy. And the person who can stay in that state, even when things are looking crazy, this person becomes a special type of individual. They elevate their status just by being able to stay calm under pressure, as we say. And all of you have heard of this, especially in the sports world. You hear people talk about it. People talk about this in the business world, and it applies in everyday home life, personal world as well. Who can stay most calm even as things get crazy? I heard this sports psychologist, pretty well-known sports psychologist named George Mumford. He talks about how when he came around the Chicago Bulls and he started dealing with the Bulls players, and this is back in the days of Michael Jordan. He came across Michael Jordan. When he first saw him, he noticed the energy that Michael Jordan had and the way that he would practice and stuff. And he figured this is eventually going to go away. Maybe this is just one special day he's having. But he noticed that Michael was like that every day, every time that he came around. And another thing George said about Michael Jordan is that He was the kind of guy who the more chaotic things got around him or the team, the more calm Michael became. He never became jittery or anxious, even when it seemed that everyone around him was jittery and anxious based on the situation in front of him. That's one of the reasons why he was a leader. And again, did you not hear me describe just this energy 2 days ago in the episode on masculine movement? When you are in, or 3 days ago, when you are in this state of calm, poised control, you become the leader. And you usually are in that state for a reason. There's something that is within you, or some work that you've already done, some homework you've already done, that allows you to be in that mental and energetic state such that everybody else looks at you and says, this person must be in charge, because look at the way that they're conducting themselves while everybody else is losing their heads. It's all connected to each other. Now, why would someone be able to do this? Because they know that they've done the work ahead of time, that no matter what happens, they'll be able to figure it out. You read any book on mindset, any book on performance, any book on leadership, they all come back around to this point right here. You read Relentless by Tim Grover. Tim Grover was Michael Jordan's trainer, famously Michael Jordan's trainer. And his book is pretty much a snapshot of Michael Jordan's mindset as Tim Grover was able to translate it. And one of the things he talks about in that book is that the highest level person, it doesn't matter what situation you put them in, they will figure out what to do. They know that they'll figure it out, even though going into it, if you ask them what they're going to do, they can't answer the question. They don't know. But they know that they will figure it out when they get into the situation, whatever it may be. If you read Letters from a Stoic, that's the book of letters compiled of one Luis Seneca. He is the godfather, the grandfather of what we call the Stoicism movement. You have a lot of contemporary writers who write about it, but Seneca's work is where it comes from. And one of the things that Seneca talks about is that the superior man gets to this position where no matter what you throw at him, no matter what happens to him, he can look at everything with a calm ease and a calm stillness, even though everything around him seems to be falling apart. This is what the man in his full masculine, or some of you may even say the alpha male, is able to get into this state. There's a book called The Go-Giver by, I think it's Bob Berg and John David Mann. I think they're the authors of this, but forgive me if I'm getting the authors wrong. I think it's those two, The Go-Giver. And one of the things that they talk about in that book is that when you're the head of a company, when you're the head of an organization, the head of a team, one of the most important things you do is you must maintain a vision in your mind about where the company is going and the future success of that business and of the team, even when the situation looks like this business might not even exist next week. And what are you talking about future success? Everything is falling to pieces right now. How can you have a vision of future success in your mind when things are looking like this? That's the reason why you're the leader. The fact that you can hold that vision in your mind, even though the situation ain't looking too good in the present. All right, that's what makes a leader a leader. And again, there are many other books and frameworks and teachings and trainings that all touch on the same thing. No matter which angle from which you come from it, it all comes back to this. Is that when things look like they're falling apart around you, can you remain calm and poised and steady? All right, that's what dominance is about. When you dominate a situation, is because you can see everything, and regardless of what's happening, you remain calm, even though everybody else is getting out of control. As we talked about before, the strongest person in the room is the one who moves and fidgets the least. Not the person who is the loudest, not the person who's the most anxious, it's the person who's the most calm when there's a lot of reasons to be anxious. Do not confuse volume with value. Dominance is about managing your energy, not exporting energy. The best way to express dominance is through certainty, not through force. And I'm pausing there because I want to make sure you got these points. Let me say this last section here one more time. Do not confuse volume with value. They are not the same. Dominance is about managing, not exporting energy. Doesn't mean you don't use it, but it's about managing the energy. And the best way to express dominance is through certainty, not necessarily through force. Because if you are truly certain about something, you may not need to use force, because you will convince people through your certainty that force is unnecessary and they won't cause you to use it. Dominance, again, about managing energy, not exporting energy. And if you ever been in a cage or a boxing ring, or you ever watched a cage fight or a boxing match, you know that the fighter who comes out and just empties their fuel tank of all the energy they have in the first round or the first minute of the first round, the problem is there's still more fight to go and you didn't manage your energy properly. You put a lot of energy out, and if you didn't knock out your opponent with that energy outburst, now what are you going to do the rest of the fight? All right, you didn't manage your energy properly. And now your opponent may end up beating you, even though you may be on paper better than them, but because you didn't manage your energy properly, you were anti-dominant, you end up getting beat. And this happens in life as well as it happens in a fight. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is the truth about dominance. Number 2, dominance must be claimed or taken, because it is never given. Just like initiative, just like leadership, dominance is not something that can be handed to you or bestowed upon you by someone else. Remember, folks, that leadership is not something that is given to you. It is taken. Initiative, again, power, again, these are all things that we've talked about over and over again. These can't be given. Someone gives you power, you don't have power. Someone gives you leadership, you don't have real leadership. You're not a true leader. Someone gives you power, you're not powerful. Someone gives you initiative, you didn't take it. You didn't take it. I mean, that's by definition. These things are taken through action, through consistency, and the clarity behind both. That's how you become a leader, by doing something. The way John Gotti put himself at the head of the mob in New York City back in the days is he and his friend Sammy the Bull made a move on a person who was in charge. They killed him, and he put himself in charge with one powerful move that shook everybody up. They said, okay, I guess this guy's the boss. He's willing to take that spot. He was willing to take it. That's how he got to that spot. Dominance, folks, starts with the way you talk to yourself and the way you see yourself in the mirror. So if you don't believe that you're a person who is dominant, you don't believe that you can lead, no one will ever force you to think that way. All right, you have to take it. That's the way it works. Michael Jordan, speaking of such, Magic Johnson often talks about how in the 80s, the LA Lakers and the Boston Celtics, Lakers led by Magic, Celtics led by Larry Bird, they dominated a lot of the 80s. At the late 80s, you got the Detroit Pistons, led by Isaiah Thomas. They were dominant, and Michael Jordan was lingering from the mid to the late 80s as the star player, and everyone knew this guy was really good, but he hadn't won on a level that those other teams had won. But when Michael Jordan got a team that was good enough to wrest that control, he beat the Detroit Pistons first, and the Boston Celtics started to fade away. And in Michael Jordan's first run at the championship, who do you have to play against? Magic Johnson and the LA Lakers. He beat Magic and the LA Lakers 4-1, and Michael, he took the lead. He took the title as I am clearly the best player now. Not only the best player individually, which everyone had already agreed to like 3 years earlier, he was the best player individually. But now I'm not only the best player as an individual, I'm the best player and on the best team at the same time. And we all know what happened from there. He was never knocked off his perch again when he played a full season for the Chicago Bulls. Once he got up there, he stayed up there. Dominance, again, starts with how you talk to yourself, the way you see yourself in the mirror. And if you don't believe you can do it, then you'll never do it. And Michael Jordan, if you read any of the books about him, I've read every book about Michael Jordan. When he was losing in the late 80s, this is once he was established as the man individual, but now he's trying to get over the hump of having the team be successful. He was losing in the late 80s and he kept losing to the same team, the Detroit Pistons. Every time he lost, he would just double down on how do I get better, or double down on how do I make my teammates better? How do I put us in a better position to win? Because even though I have the personal accolades, he didn't see that as the end all be all. The end all be all was the team has to win. I got to win the championship. I can't just be putting up stats and have everybody tell me how good I am. I got to beat all the other teams, because if they're beating me, then I'm not achieving my goal. His goal was not get stats. His goal was beat everybody else. And to beat them, you had to win the game, not just the stats comparison. And he understood that. So the conversation he was having in his own head, again, according to him, was I have to step up my game. I got to help my teammates step up their games. And I got to make sure I'm elevating everybody, because me doing it all by myself clearly makes me look good, but it's not going to help me achieve the goal of beating the other team. So I have to figure out other ways to get the rest of the team up there with me. So no one will ever force you to think you're a leader if you're not one. All right, you got to believe that you are one, and you got to show some signs that you could be one in order for anybody else to believe it. How many people out there who will go out and create opportunities for themselves, not waiting for someone, something, or something to happen, or someone to do something for them, as we talk about in the opening of the show every day? How many people are there to fit that description? How many do you know who fit that description? They go and create opportunities for themselves. They don't wait for something. They don't wait for someone. They just go out there and do it. These are your leaders. These are your potential leaders, excuse me. If you want to dominate, you must be willing to step up and assert yourself, even in the face of opposition that says, well, hey, maybe you're not the person who's going to lead. You have to believe that you can be, even if there's no one co-signing your belief. If you are unwilling to do this, somebody else will take the lead, and then they will subjugate you. They'll be in the power position, and now you got to listen to them. So this is a binary, folks, and you must make a choice or have a choice made for you. This is the way it works. You step into a leadership position, or you will be in a position of following someone who did. But there is no neutral out here. Or there is a neutral. You could go off and live in a log cabin in the woods where you're not dealing with human beings. But anything other than that, when you're dealing in the civil society where there are other humans, you either lead or you follow someone who does, period. Point number 3, Today's topic, once again, is the truth about dominance. Number 3, dominance requires sustained performance. What does sustained performance mean? It means you got to do it over and over and over again, not just here and there, over and over and over again. Michael Jordan again. One of the things that Michael talks about, they asked him about what they call in sports, they call it making the leap, L-E-A-P, the leap. And this was in the specific context of basketball, but it can apply to any sport. But let's keep it basketball. That's the sport I know best, and that's the sport Michael Jordan played. They asked him about when do you make the leap? And the leap, for those who don't know what it is when a player goes from being a potential star to being an actual star. And what makes you an actual star, I'll even tell you what Michael Jordan said, paraphrasing, it's when you have a really good game every game. It's not when you have a really good game every now and then, or when it's a big game or everybody's watching, or you're playing some primetime game on ESPN and you know you're getting a lot of attention, or there's some big celebrities in the crowd, so you decide to step your game up that night. Making the leap and being the dominant person is when you have a great game every game, even when there's not a lot of fans in the stands, even when the game seemingly, quote unquote, doesn't matter, even when it's not a big moment and the team you're playing against ain't even that good, you still have a really good game every night, even if there's no quote unquote motivation or quote unquote reason for you to do it, you do it anyway. That's when you make the leap. And that's much more of a mental thing than it is a physical thing. Because physically, of course, you're capable of doing it, but mentally, can you bring yourself to do it even when there is no real driving external reason to do it? And it's the reason why people who get to these dominant positions, there's something driving them internally. They are intrinsically driven, not extrinsically driven. Extrinsically driven means you're driven by things that happen outside of you. Intrinsically driven means you're driven by things that happen inside of you. And someone like Michael Jordan or other leaders who you can name, maybe even yourself, are and were intrinsically driven. It's about what they're telling themselves and the story they're telling themselves, not the story everybody else is talking about. They become the story of everyone else because of what the story is that they have themselves. Dominant people are usually very disciplined at what they do, at least if they're going to stay dominant for long. And you can only remain dominant for as long as you are producing. Now, if you're not producing, you're not dominant. It's like the top performer in the sport. You're only the top performer for as long as you're beating everybody else. As soon as somebody else beats you, you're no longer at the top of the mountain. All right, now you got to fight back up to the top. Your dominance is not shown through random moments of brilliance, but through constant, consistent brilliance to the point that people begin to take your brilliance for granted. You just do it so much that it's almost like nobody's surprised anymore. And that's the level that you want to get to. Puff Daddy, or some of you call him P. Diddy or Diddy, as of this recording, he's essentially on trial for his life. But I'm not bringing him up because of that. But he has a line in one of his songs that he put out years ago. This is probably 25 years ago, where he said, what do you do when you get to the point that you're expected to win and you're not surprised anymore? Which is exactly the point that I'm making here. When you winning is not surprising anybody because you won the last 10 times and now everybody sees you coming and they're like, oh, this is the guy who's going to win again. Everybody's expecting you to win. So you can't draw your motivation. Think about this. In that case, when everyone's expecting you to win because they saw you win the last 10 times, you cannot draw motivation extrinsically because there is no extrinsic motivation for you because everybody's expecting you to win. What are you motivated by? That you're expected to win, you won the last 10 times. You can't possibly be motivated by that. You have to go and find and or create a motivation outside of the externalities. See, and I'm going to talk about this in a future episode of this show. One of the easiest situations to be in is when you know you're good and you know you're capable and no one is expecting you to win, because you can use the fact that no one's expecting you to win as motivation. But what about when you're good and capable and everybody's expecting you to win? Well, you can't use that as motivation because that's boring. You already did it already. They're all diminishing returns, folks. That applies to everybody. It's science. Do anything often enough, the value of doing that thing goes down, 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 down the more times you do it. So how do you keep doing something after you've already gotten the value out of it, the maximum value, and the value just keeps getting lower? You have to keep finding or creating different reasons to keep doing that same thing because the reason that you did it originally no longer exists. Michael Jordan winning his first championship was people said he couldn't win a championship, and he hadn't won a championship. So that was a great motivation. Okay, so now how do you win the second time? Because you already proved you can win. Okay, what's the reason the second time? What's the reason the third time? What's the reason the fourth time? What's the reason the fifth time? What's the reason the sixth time? This is the mental challenge of dominance. That's the reason dominance is not about, again, an exportation of energy. Dominance is about what story you're telling yourself in your mind and can you keep it up over time, even as you continue to dominate. And again, you're not surprising anybody with your dominance anymore. Remember that this is a results-based business, folks. You cannot be dominant while losing. You have to keep winning to be dominant. Also, you cannot be inconsistent and call yourself dominant. What makes you dominant is that you're always that way. Your habits, your execution, your personal identity, none of these can be inconsistent. You got to keep them up all the time. They can't be shaken by things. So again, let's keep using Michael Jordan as an example. When he lost in the NBA playoffs in 1995, after he came back for a very brief part of the last part of the NBA season that year, coming back off his baseball hiatus, Michael Jordan lost in the playoffs. But he didn't lose his sense of, I am still Michael Jordan. He just decided, his decision was, okay, the reason why I wasn't able to be Michael Jordan all the way in this series that we just lost in the playoffs was that I've been spending all my time training my body for baseball. I was still pretty good, but I was training for baseball, and I'm not that good that I can't train for basketball and still beat everybody in basketball. So let me spend the offseason dedicating myself again to getting good at basketball, and then I'll beat everybody again. That was the bet he placed, and the next 3 seasons, he beat everybody again, 3 years in a row. So you can't be inconsistent. Your habits can't be inconsistent. Michael Jordan got inconsistent in his basketball training because he was playing baseball. That's why he got beat. Now, even he, the best player in the world, ain't that good. He still had to keep his habits up. That's the part I want you to get. His execution was off because his habits were off. And because his execution and his habits were off, he wasn't living up to his personal identity of being Michael Jordan, i.e. beat everybody easily. He was still pretty damn good. The year that they lost in the playoffs, Michael Jordan's stats were still impressive. You'll look up the stats, you wouldn't know that he left. His stats were still pretty good. And he was still scoring 40, 50 points in games, and they lost, though. The reason they lost, because, again, to be dominant, your habits, your execution, all of it got to be aligned. You can't slip on something and say you're dominant. You can't do that. You can't cheat the game. All that said, folks, let's recap today's class, which is the truth about dominance. Again, this dovetails perfectly what we just talked about in previous episodes here. Definition of dominance is power and influence over others, commanding, controlling, or prevailing over all others. Number 1, dominance is about control, not necessarily aggression. Real dominance is much more calm, composed, and strategic more than it is loud and chaotic. A lot of people get that wrong. Number 2, dominance is something that is claimed or taken. It is never given. If someone gives you dominance, you're not dominant. Someone gives you leadership, you're not a leader. Someone gives you power, you have no power. You have to actually take it. And number 3, dominance requires sustained performance. You have to do it over and over and over again. As we said, to make the leap, you got to have a good game every game. You can't have a good game 2 nights in a row, then have 2 trash games, and have another good game, then 3 nights you're kind of quiet, then have another great game. It got to be all the time, to the point that you normalize your high level of performance to the point that people expect it and then you still do it. They expect it and they plan to stop you and you still do it. That's when you become dominant. And number 3, that was number 3. All that being said, workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to learn to be dominant in your life. First of all, with yourself, with the person in the mirror, you want to be dominant, showing up every day and delivering the way you're supposed to consistently, the way you hear this show delivered every single day. Let's get over to Work on Your Game University. You want to apply this also to your business and the way that you do your business and the way that you operate and get things done for your clients and your customers so that you get the returns you need because they're getting the returns they want. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Have me as your coach and let's get to it. I'm ready for you. Work on your game. Dre all